My mother-in-law clinked her champagne glass with a dessert spoon, and the room went quiet. That's how it always worked with Margaret Calloway. She demanded attention, and the world gave it to her, every single time. I watched her rise from her seat at the head of the table, that perfect silver hair catching the chandelier light, and I knew before she opened her mouth that whatever came next was going to hurt. 10 years, Margaret announced, her voice carrying across the private dining room like she was addressing a congregation. 10 years ago, my son Kevin made a choice that I'll admit I didn't understand at the time. She paused for effect's time. 0.3s, letting her gaze drift to me with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. He married a waitress. Soft laughter rippled through the 20 guests assembled for our anniversary dinner. Kevin's hand found mine under the table and squeezed. A warning. Don't react. Don't make a scene. I'd gotten that squeeze approximately 10,000 times over the past decade. Margaret smiled, warming to her audience. But Kevin has always had a generous heart. Too generous, some might say. He saw potential where others saw. Well, she gestured vaguely in my direction. Time 0.4s. And for 10 years, he has carried this family on his shoulders. He has built his career, provided a beautiful home, given Jenna here a life she never could have dreamed of when she was refilling coffee cups and hoping for tips. I felt my cheeks burn. Across the table, Kevin's colleague Brad was smirking into his wine glass. His wife Patricia studied her manicure like it contained the secrets of the universe. These were people I'd hosted in my home, people I'd cooked Christmas dinners for, and they were enjoying this. So tonight, Margaret continued, raising her glass, I want to toast my son for his patience, his dedication, his willingness to lift up those less fortunate, even when it would have been easier to walk away. She looked directly at me now, no pretense of subtlety. Kevin, darling, you are proof that some men are simply born to carry others. Happy anniversary. Happy anniversary! The room echoed, glasses raised, and I sat there with that familiar weight pressing down on my chest, the one I'd been carrying for 10 years, the one that whispered, maybe she's right, maybe you are nothing, maybe you got lucky and everyone knows time 0.4s. Kevin leaned over and kissed my cheek. She doesn't mean it the way it sounds, he murmured against my ear. You know how she gets after a few drinks. She'd had 1 glass of champagne. Margaret Calloway never lost control. She just pretended to, so she'd have an excuse later. But I smiled and nodded because that's what I'd trained myself to do. Smile, nod, survive. Here's the thing Margaret didn't know, the thing nobody at that table knew except me. I wasn't a waitress anymore. I hadn't been for 9 years. I owned Calloway Creative Partners, the marketing firm where Kevin worked as creative director. I'd bought it when it was failing, rebuilt it from nothing, grown it into an $8.2 million company with 37 employees and clients across 3 states. Every paycheck Kevin had deposited for the past 5 years had my signature on the authorization, even if he didn't know it. I'd kept it secret for complicated reasons that made sense at the time. Legal separation of assets, letting Kevin feel successful on his own merits, avoiding exactly the kind of conversation where Margaret would claim her son deserved credit for everything I'd built. But sitting there listening to her call me a charity case, I wondered if the real reason was simpler and sadder. I'd wanted them to love me without a price tag. I'd wanted to be enough just as myself. Spoiler alert, I wasn't. The dinner dragged on for another 2 hours. I smiled until my face ached, made small talk about nothing, pretended I didn't notice when Patricia asked if I'd ever considered going back to school for something practical. By the time we got home, I was so tired I could barely stand, but sleep wasn't coming, not with what was waiting on my phone. 3 missed calls from Diana Russo. Diana was my CFO, my best friend since college, and the only person outside my attorney who knew the truth about my ownership of the company. Diana didn't call 3 times unless something was seriously wrong. I waited until Kevin was in the shower, then stepped onto our back patio and called her back. The October air was cold enough to make me shiver, but I barely noticed. "Jenna." Diana's voice was tight, controlled, the way she got when she was trying not to panic. "We have a problem. A big one." "What kind of problem?" "Money is missing. From the operating accounts. I noticed the discrepancy last week and I've been digging ever since, trying to figure out if it was a bookkeeping error, but it's not. Someone has been siphoning funds through fake consulting invoices, and it's been going on for at least 2 years. My stomach dropped. "How much?" Diana was quiet for a moment. 200,000. Maybe more. I'm still tracing everything. $200,000. Gone. Stolen from the company I'd built with my own hands, my own sleepless nights, my own faith when everyone told me I'd fail. "Do you know who?" I asked, even though something in my gut already knew. Something had been wrong for months. Kevin's new watch. The car. Upgrade, he said, came from a performance bonus I'd never authorized. The way he'd been distant and distracted. I'd told myself it was stress, midlife restlessness, anything but what I was suddenly terrified it actually was. Diana's answer confirmed my worst fear. The invoices were approved by Kevin. All of them. His authorization code, his email confirmations. "Jenna, I'm so sorry, but your husband has been stealing from you." The sliding glass door opened behind me. Kevin stepped out, hair still damp from his shower, wearing the cashmere robe I'd bought him for his birthdays. Time 0.4s. He smiled at me. That easy. Charming smile that had made me fall in love with him 10 years ago in a diner where I was refilling his coffee and he was telling me I was too smart to be stuck in a place like this. "Everything okay?" he asked. "You look upset." I forced my face into neutral. "Just work stuff. Diana being dramatic about quarterly projections." He nodded, already losing interest. "Don't stay out here too long. It's freezing." He kissed my forehead, the same forehead his mother had basically called empty 2 hours ago, and went back inside. I stood in the cold for another 20 minutes, letting Diana walk me through what she'd found so far. The fake consulting company was called MHC Enterprises. It had a P.O. box in the suburbs, no employees, no actual services rendered. Just invoices that appeared in our system and checks that disappeared into an account I'd never heard of. "I'm going to find out who's behind MHC, Diana said. "It might take a few days, but I'll trace it." "Do it," I told her. "And Diana, don't tell anyone else. Not yet. I need to understand what I'm dealing with before I do anything." I hung up and stared at the stars, wondering how I'd ended up here, successful beyond my wildest dreams, and still somehow the fool who didn't see the knife until it was already in her back. Let me tell you how I became the invisible owner of my own company, because it explains a lot about how I ended up married to a man who was robbing me blind while his mother called me a gold digger. I met Kevin Calloway when I was 24 years old and working double shifts at a diner called Rosie's. I was putting myself through night school for marketing, surviving on 4 hours of sleep and the kind of stubborn determination that comes from having no safety net. My mother had died 2 years earlier, ovarian cancer, caught too late because she'd been too poor and too proud to see a doctor. My father had left when I was 6. I had no siblings, no family money, no connections, just me and my textbooks and the desperate belief that I could build something better. Kevin walked into Rosie's on a rainy Tuesday night, ordered pancakes at 11 p.m., and told me I had the most expressive eyes he'd ever seen. He was 26, working at a mid-level marketing firm, handsome in that slightly rumpled way that made him seem approachable. He asked for my number. I said no 3 times before I finally said yes. Our first date, he took me to an art museum and spent 2 hours asking my opinions on everything we saw. Nobody had ever cared what I thought about art before. Nobody had ever cared what I thought about much of anything. Kevin made me feel seen in a way I'd been starving for my whole life, And I fell for him so hard and so fast that I ignored every red flag his family threw at me. Margaret hated me from the moment we met. I wasn't from the right background, didn't have the right education, didn't carry myself with the kind of polished confidence she expected from a potential daughter-in-law. When Kevin told her we were engaged, she offered him $50,000 to break it off. He refused, and I thought that meant something. Time has 0.4s. I thought it meant he'd chosen me. What I didn't understand then was that Kevin hadn't chosen me over his mother. He'd just found a new way to keep us both, marry the woman he wanted while letting his mother believe she was right about me all along. For 10 years, he'd walked that line, never defending me publicly, never pushing back on Margaret's cruelty, always finding ways to make me feel like I was the problem for being hurt. The company came into my life 5 years into our marriage. Kevin's firm, Calloway Creative Partners, no relation to his family name, just a coincidence that felt like fate, was circling the drain. Bad management. Time, 0.3s. Worse clients. Hemorrhaging money. Kevin came home one night terrified he was about to lose his job, and something in me clicked. I'd finished my marketing degree by then. I'd been doing freelance consulting on the side, building a reputation quietly, saving every penny I could. I had ideas, real ideas, about what that company could become if someone just had the guts to try. So I went to my attorney, set up an LLC, and made an offer to buy the failing firm. The owner was so desperate to get out that he practically threw the keys at me. I didn't tell Kevin. I told myself it was for legal reasons. Asset, protection, liability separation, the kind of boring stuff that puts people to sleep. But the truth was more complicated. I wanted to see if I could do it alone. I wanted to build something that was mine, that nobody could credit to my husband's family or my husband's support or anything except my own 2 hands. And I did. I worked 18-hour days while Kevin thought I was doing freelance projects. I rebuilt the client list, hired new talent, landed accounts that everyone said were impossible. Within 3 years, the company went from $400,000 in revenue to $4 million, then $6 million, then $8 million. I promoted Kevin to creative director because he was competent enough and because having a familiar face in leadership helped with the transition. He never questioned how he got the job. He just assumed he deserved it. That's the kind of man I married, the kind who assumes he deserves things. I should have told him the truth somewhere along the way. I know that. But every time I considered it, something stopped me. His mother's voice in my head calling me a gold digger, his casual dismissal of my little consulting projects. The fear that if he knew I was more successful than him, he'd stop loving me. So I stayed invisible. Time 0.4s. I let him believe he was the breadwinner. I let his mother mock me while I signed the checks that paid for her country club membership and her charity donations and every other thing she bragged about. I thought I was being patient, strategic, protecting the peace. Turns out I was just setting myself up to be robbed by the people I trusted most. Diana called me 4 days after the anniversary dinner with the answer I'd been dreading. MHC Enterprises, she said. Margaret Helen Calloway. It's her, Jenna. The money has been going directly to your mother-in-law. I was sitting in my car in the parking lot of a job sit. Time 0.3s, watching my project manager coordinate the installation of a sculpture garden for a tech company's headquarters. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was surrounded by evidence of everything I'd built, and I was finding out that my husband had been funneling my money to the woman who called me worthless. How much total? I asked. My voice sounded strange, distant, like it belonged to someone else. I've traced $247,000 so far. It goes back almost 3 years. Diana paused. Jenna, there's more. I found emails between Kevin and Margaret. They've been planning this for a while. They're not just stealing. They're building a case. What kind of case? Divorce. Kevin's been meeting with an attorney for the past 8 months. Margaret's been coaching him on what to say, how to present himself as the primary earner, How to claim he deserves half of what they don't even know you own. I laughed. I couldn't help it. It was so absurd, so perfectly representative of everything Margaret had ever thought about me. She genuinely believed her son was the successful one, that I was nothing but a leech who'd gotten lucky, and she was helping him prepare to discard me and take half of everything I'd built. They don't know. Time 0.3s, I said slowly. They actually don't know that I own the company. They have no idea. In all the emails, they talk about Kevin's career, Kevin's firm, Kevin's success. They think you're irrelevant. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt something much colder, the realization that my husband had never seen me at all. Not once in 10 years. He'd married a waitress, and in his mind, that's all I'd ever been. There's one more thing, Diana said quietly. The timeline. The first consultation with the divorce attorney was 8 months ago, March 15th. March 15th, 3 days after my miscarriage. I'd been 10 weeks pregnant when I lost the baby. Kevin had held me while I cried in the hospital, brought me flowers, told me we'd try again when I was ready. And 3 days later, while I was still bleeding, still grieving, still wondering what I'd done wrong, he'd been sitting in a lawyer's office planning how to take everything from me. Jenna. Diana's voice was worried. Are you still there? I'm here. I was surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Something had shifted inside Annie. Time at 0.3s, some final lock clicking shut. I need you to compile everything. Every transaction, every email, every piece of evidence. I want a complete picture of exactly what they've done. What are you going to do? I watched my project manager shake hands with the client, both of them admiring the sculpture garden I'd designed, and I thought about all the things I'd built that nobody gave me credit for. All the years of being dismissed and underestimated and treated like I was lucky to be in the room. I'm going to do what I always do. I said, I'm going to work the problem until I find the solution. And then I'm going to make sure everyone sees exactly who the real gold digger is. 3 days later, I met Connor Calloway at a coffee shop across town. Connor was Kevin's younger brother, the family disappointment, 31, unmarried, working as a freelance artist instead of joining the corporate world like a respectable Calloway. Margaret mentioned him only to sigh about his wasted potential or to hold him up as an example of what happened when you didn't apply yourself. I'd always liked Connor. He was the only member of Kevin's family who'd ever treated me like a human being instead of a problem to be tolerated. But I hadn't seen him in months, and I wasn't sure whose side he'd be on when everything fell apart. Thanks for meeting me, I said, sliding into the booth across from him. He looked tired, stubble darker than usual, paint stains on his jacket that he hadn't bothered to hide. Thanks for calling. He wrapped his hands around his coffee mug. Honestly, I've been wanting to talk to you for a while. I just didn't know how to bring it up. Bring what up? Connor was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. 6 months ago, I was at my mom's house fixing her garbage disposal. She calls me for the manual labor since Kevin's too important for that kind of thing, and I overheard her on the phone with Kevin. They were talking about the company, Kevin's company. Except what? Except the way they were talking didn't make sense. Kevin was asking Mom about when the transfer comes through and making sure the timing is right. And Mom said something like, once you're free of her, we can finally put you in the position you deserve. He met my eyes. I didn't understand it then, but I've been paying attention since. And Jenna, something is really wrong. I took a breath. I know exactly what's wrong, and I'm going to tell you something that can't leave this table. I told him everything, the company, the theft, the divorce planning, the emails Diana had found. I watched his face cycle through disbelief, then anger, then something that looked almost like relief. I knew it. He said quietly, I knew something wasn't right. Kevin's been weird for the past year, distant, secretive, looking over his shoulder. And Mom has been too happy. Like she's won something. He shook his head. Go. Time zero, freeze. Jenna, I'm so sorry. My family is... Your family is your family. But you're not them, Connor. You never have been. I leaned forward. I need your help. I need someone on the inside who can tell me what they're planning. Can you do that? He didn't hesitate. Tell me what you need. Over the next 3 weeks, Connor became my spy in enemy territory. He visited Margaret more frequently, asked casual questions, kept his ears open. Meanwhile, Diana and I built our case, forensic accountants, documentatio, time 0.3s, a timeline of every lie Kevin had told for the past 3 years. I hired an attorney named Rachel Park, a sharp woman who specialized in exactly this kind of mess. When I showed her the evidence, she was quiet for a long moment before speaking. Your husband has been embezzling from a company he doesn't know you own, and he's planning to divorce you and claim half of that same company's assets. She almost smiled. In 20 years of family law, I've never seen someone set themselves up for failure this completely. What happens when I expose him? He gets nothing. He's not an owner. He's an employee who's been stealing. You can fire him for cause, pursue criminal charges, and he'll have zero claim to the company in divorce proceedings because there's nothing to claim. It's all yours. I nodded slowly. And Margaret, the money she received. That's elder financial abuse charges for Kevin, fraud charges for both of them if you want to pursue it. The fake consulting company alone is enough for criminal prosecution. I had them. Completely, totally, irrevocably. All I had to do was decide how I wanted it to end. That's when Connor called with one final piece of information. Mom's charity gala is in 2 weeks, he said. The big one at the country club, the one she spends all year planning. Everyone she's ever wanted to impress will be there, her church friends, her social circle, the women she plays bridge with. She's planning to announce Kevin's big promotion and talk about his upcoming life changes. He paused. She means the divorce. She's going to announce that he's leaving you, and she's going to do it in front of everyone so she can watch you be humiliated. I thought about that anniversary dinner, Margaret's toast, the laughter, Kevin's hand squeezing mine, time 0.3s telling me not to react. Don't make a scene. Just take it like I always did. Connor, I said slowly, I think I'd like to attend your mother's charity gala. I was hoping you'd say that. The Millbrook Country Club looked beautiful on the night of Margaret's gala. White tents on the lawn, fairy lights strung through the trees, a string quartet playing something elegant near the fountain. I'd never been invited before. Margaret always claimed it was members only, and I wouldn't feel comfortable around her friends, but I'd bought a ticket online like any other guest. $150 to attend a charity event at a club my own. Stolen money was paying for. The irony was almost too perfect. I wore a dress I'd bought specifically for this night, navy blue, simple, elegant, the kind of dress that said I belonged without trying too hard. Kevin had left for the event 2 hours before me, kissing my forehead and saying he'd see me at home later. Don't wait up. He had no idea I was coming. Neither did Margaret. Diana met me in the parking lot, carrying a briefcase full of documents. Rachel was inside already, positioned near the bar, waiting for my signal. A reporter from the local business journal had received an anonymous tip about major revelations at a prominent local company and was mingling with a glass of wine, not sure yet what story she was about to witness. I found Connor near the entrance. He looked as nervous as I felt, but when he saw me, something like pride flickered across his face. You ready? He asked. I've been ready for 10 years. I just didn't know it. We walked in together. The ballroom was crowded with Margaret's people, wealthy women in expensive dresses, Men in suits that cost more than my first year's salary at the diner, everyone performing success for everyone else. I spotted Kevin across the room, laughing with a group of his colleagues, and for a moment, I let myself feel the grief of it. I had loved him once. I had believed in him. I had built a life around someone who'd never bothered to see me. Then I let it go. Margaret was holding court near the stage, receiving compliments on the decorations like she'd designed them herself. When she saw me, her face went through a remarkable series of expressions: confusion, annoyance, and then a careful rearrangement into her public smile. "Jenna," she said, cheek-kissing me without warmth. "What a surprise. I didn't realize you'd be here." "I bought a ticket. It's for charity." "Right. I wanted to support." Something flickered in her eyes. Suspicion, maybe, but she was too well trained to make a scene in front of her friends. "How thoughtful of you. Kevin mentioned you've been feeling under the weather. I assumed you'd stay home." "I'm feeling much better now. Clear-headed, ready for anything." She didn't know what to do with that, so she excused herself to greet other guests. I watched her go. This woman who had spent a decade convincing everyone I was worthless, and I felt nothing but a strange, calm clarity. The event progressed. Dinner was served. Wine was poured. Margaret made small talk about her charity work, her church involvement, her dedication to lifting up the less fortunate, which was rich coming from someone who'd been stealing from her daughter-in-law for 3 years. Kevin avoided me entirely, probably assuming I'd crash his mother's party to cause drama. He had no idea the drama was already planned, and it was much bigger than anything he'd imagined. Finally, Margaret took the stage. She tapped the microphone, smiled her gracious hostess smile, and began her speech. "Thank you all for being here tonight. Your generosity never ceases to amaze me." She talked about the charity, the cause, the importance of community, all the words that sounded good and meant nothing. Then her voice warmed, and I knew we were getting to the real show. "I want to take a moment to celebrate someone very special," Margaret said. "My son Kevin has worked so hard this year, and I'm thrilled to announce that he's about to embark on an exciting new chapter. A promotion, new opportunities, and some personal changes that I know will bring him the happiness he deserves." She looked at me across the room, and I saw it, the gleam of victory in her eyes. She was about to announce that Kevin was leaving me, and she wanted me to watch her do it. I stood up. The movement caught her attention. She faltered, just slightly, but kept going. "As many of you know, Kevin has built his career at Calloway Creative Partners into something truly, actually," I said, my voice carrying across the room. "I'd like to say a few words about that." Silence. Every head turned toward me. Kevin went pale. "So," Margaret's smile froze on her face. "I apologize for interrupting." I continued, walking toward the stage. "But since we're celebrating Kevin's career tonight, I think everyone should know the full story." Margaret recovered quickly. "Jenna, dear, this isn't the time. It's exactly the time." I reached the stage and turned to face the room. 150 faces staring at me, waiting to see what the crazy daughter-in-law would do. But I wasn't crazy. I was finally, completely sane. "My name is Jenna Calloway. For the past 10 years, Margaret and Kevin have told everyone that I'm a waitress who trapped Kevin into marriage, a burden he generously carries, a woman with no career and no future. And I never corrected them because I thought if I was patient enough, they'd eventually see me for who I really am." I took a breath. They never did. So now I'm going to tell you myself. I pulled the ownership documents from my bag, the ones Rachel had certified, the ones that proved everything. I am the sole owner of Calloway Creative Partners. I bought the company 9 years ago when it was failing, rebuilt it from the ground up, and grew it into an $8.2 million business. Time 0.4s. Every paycheck Kevin has earned for the past 5 years has been authorized by me. Every bonus, every benefit, every promotion, all mine to give. The room was absolutely silent. Kevin looked like he might faint. Margaret had gone gray. I kept it secret because I wanted my husband's family to love me for myself, not my money. That was my mistake. Because while I was building an empire, Kevin and Margaret were building something else. Diana appeared beside me and handed me the next file. I opened it and began reading. For the past 3 years, Kevin has been approving fake consulting, invoices through my company. The payments have gone to a shell corporation called MHC Enterprises, Margaret Calloway. The total stolen so far is $247,000. I looked at Margaret. That country club membership you're so proud of. I paid for it. Those charity donations everyone admires. My money. The new car. The renovated kitchen. The vacation to Italy. All funded by checks your son stole from me. Gasps. Whispers. Someone's wine glass shattered on the floor. But it gets better. I continued. Because while they were stealing from me, they were also planning to discard me. Kevin has been meeting with a divorce attorney for 8 months. Margaret has been coaching him on what to say, how to claim half of a company they don't even know I own. I pulled out the printed emails. Would you like me to read some of their conversations? They're quite illuminating. This is slander, Margaret finally managed, her voice shaking. This is lies. Kevin, tell them. Kevin couldn't tell anyone anything. He was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. And maybe he hadn't. Maybe he'd been looking at the waitress he thought he'd married for so long that he'd missed the woman standing right in front of him. Here's my favorite part, I said, and I played the recording Connor had given me, Margaret's voice, clear as a bell, saying, "Tell them she was never involved in business decisions. She's just arm candy who got lucky. The company's success is all you." The room erupted. People were talking, exclaiming. Several guests were already heading for the exits. The reporter from the business journal was furiously taking notes. And Margaret looked like her entire world was crumbling, which it was. Connor stood up from his table. "I've seen the evidence," he said, his voice steady despite everything. "My mother has been stealing from Jenna for years, and she's been planning to help Kevin take even more. I'm ashamed of my family, but I won't be part of it." Margaret turned on him with venom in her eyes. "You ungrateful—" "No." Connor's voice was quiet but firm. "I watched you do this to Dad. I watched you take control of everything until he had nothing left. I won't watch it again." Kevin finally found his voice. "Jenna, please, can we talk about this privately? We're past private." "Kevin." I handed him the termination letter. "You're fired. For cause. Embezzlement. You have no equity in the company because you were never an owner, just an employee, a dishonest one. And according to my attorney, you may be facing criminal charges as well." He grabbed my arm, desperation making him rough. "You can't do this to me. I'm your husband. I gave you everything." I removed his hand, gently but firmly. "No, Kevin. I gave you everything. You just never bothered to notice." I left the stage and walked out of the ballroom without looking back. Diana fell into step beside me, and then Connor, and then Rachel. We pushed through the doors into the cool night air, and I kept walking until I reached my car, my practical Honda that I'd never traded in for something flashier because it worked perfectly well. I leaned against it and let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for 10 years. "You okay?" Diana asked. "Yeah." I looked up at the stars. "I think I'm going to be." 1 month later, I sat in my office watching the sunrise paint the city gold through my windows. Kevin had moved out the night of the gala. The divorce was proceeding smoothly since there was nothing to fight over. Margaret was facing fraud charges and had been dropped by most of her social circle. It turned out her friends were only loyal as long as she was useful. The business journal story had actually brought us new clients. Apparently, people admired a woman who took down her own family's corruption. My phone buzzed. A text from Connor. Mom asked me to ask you for money. Said you owe her because you ruined her life. I told her that was the funniest thing I'd ever heard. I smiled. Connor and I had lunch every week now. He was the one good thing to come out of that family, the unexpected ally, who'd proven that blood doesn't have to mean loyalty to the wrong people. Kevin had called 3 times, each message more desperate than the last. I'm sorry. I was confused. My mother pressured me. The same excuses he'd been making for 10 years. I deleted everyone without responding. Some conversations weren't worth having. I picked up a framed photo from my desk. My mother, taken a year before she died, standing in front of the diner where I used to work. She was smiling, tired but proud, and I wondered what she'd think of everything I'd become. I spent 10 years trying to make them love me. Time 0.3s, I said to her picture. Turns out I should have spent that energy loving myself. But I think you already knew that. My assistant knocked on the door. Your 9 o'clock is here. The Peterson account. They're talking about expanding the contract. I took one more look at the sunrise, at the city spread out below me, at the empire I'd built from nothing while everyone told me I was nothing. Send them in, I said. Let's get to work. Margaret called me a gold digger for a decade. Turns out I was the gold mine. And she was the one digging, straight into my accounts. My marriage. Time 0.3s of my life. But here's what people like her never understand. You can't take from someone who knows their own worth. You can only reveal who you really are. My name is Jenna Calloway. I own an $8 million company. I employ 37 people who count on me. And I will never, ever apologize for being exactly who I am. Some people spend so much time looking down on others, they never notice they're standing in a hole they dug themselves. I finally stopped filling it in for them.